You know, when we talk about refugee resettlement, we usually get caught up in the big picture, logistics, policies, numbers. But what does it really take for a child to not just arrive in a new country, but to actually truly feel like they belong? Okay, let's dive into this because the real answer is so much more complex and a lot more human than you might think. This right here, this quote from a Syrian refugee parent, it just gets straight to the heart of it. See, beyond the need for a roof over their head or filling out paperwork, there is this deep, fundamental human need for connection, for a safe space to just release the incredible weight of their journey. This is the emotional reality that all those policies and school systems have to deal with. Okay, so where do we even begin? Well, let's start with those official systems. On paper, at least, the welcome mat is laid out with what looks like a pretty clear blueprint for success. So, on paper, this blueprint for a new start, it looks amazing, right? Countries like New Zealand build their entire resettlement strategy around these four pillars. It's this really robust framework of rights, provision, protection, and participation. But, and this is the crucial question, what actually happens when this really well-intentioned plan smacks into the real world? Well, this is where that gap opens up. A huge one. In New Zealand, a promise of housing support actually leads to families becoming homeless. In Ecuador, constitutional rights that look great in a book just aren't being implemented on the ground. And the common thread through it all? A total lack of coordination. It was summed up perfectly by one person who said, everybody was sticking to their knitting. In other words, these well-meaning policies are failing because the different parts of the system aren't talking to each other. All right, so let's zoom in a little. Let's go to the main arena where all these policies really get tested day in and day out, the school. For these kids, this is where the hard work of building a new life truly begins. But inside that classroom, there's a really subtle but incredibly powerful force at play. It's something researchers call symbolic violence. Now, it's not physical, but trust me, it has a massive impact on a family's sense of whether they belong or not. So what is it? Basically, it's this subtle pressure where the host country's way of doing things, their norms, their values, are presented as the only correct way. And what that does, even when it's unintentional, is it devalues all the skills, knowledge, and cultural capital that refugee families bring with them. It makes them feel like outsiders whose experiences just don't count. And if you want a perfect example of what this looks like in the real world, check this out. This finding from a study in Norway shows these well-meaning educators who believe their job is to teach refugee parents how to act as Norwegian parents. Now, the intention is probably to help them fit in, but the effect, the message they're sending is that your way of parenting is wrong. And that becomes a really powerful way of excluding people. So you hear all this, the policy gaps, the cultural misunderstandings, and it's easy to assume that teachers must just be completely overwhelmed, right? You'd think they might even see this work as just an extra burden. But is that actually true? Well, when you look at the data, wow, it tells a completely different story. A survey asked teachers that exact question, and get this, a massive 84% either disagreed or strongly disagreed. 84%! Only a tiny 3% felt it was a burden. So that just completely flips the stereotype on its head. So if it's not a burden, what's actually driving them? Research with educators in Chile found this really powerful motivator they called vocación. It's a Spanish word, and it means so much more than just a job. It's a calling, a deep, personal, vocational commitment. One teacher put it this way: I am a teacher due to my vocación, because I believe in our capacity to change the life of the people. It's this personal drive that so often bridges the massive gaps left behind by the system. And that brings us to, honestly, the most important voice in this entire conversation. Let's shift our focus away from the systems and even the educators, and let's listen to the children themselves. When a refugee child was asked what they do when they need psychological help, this was their answer. Nothing. I keep things to myself, suppressed in my heart. Just let that sink in for a second. It points to this whole hidden world of unspoken trauma. So many stories just locked away because there's no safe way to share them. This begs a really important question, right? What if we could give them a tool, a new kind of language to express those suppressed stories in a way that feels safe, a way that feels empowering? Well, one incredible method is called digital storytelling. It's a guided process, but it's really simple. Kids use pictures, music, and their own voice to create a short personal film. The key thing is, it gives them complete creative control. It's their story told their way. Now, here's the thing that is just absolutely incredible. When the educators set up these workshops, they were expecting to hear stories about trauma, about loss, about the difficult journey. But the children, they chose to tell a completely different kind of story. Instead of focusing on the pain of the past, they built their entire narratives around these positive, forward-looking themes. They told stories about achievement, about making their first new friend, about the strength they get from their family, stories about learning, adapting, and most of all, about hope. It's just this powerful reminder of their incredible resilience. Take this one example from a Syrian child named Musab. He made a story called Winter Advice. It wasn't about war or being a refugee. It was about making the horrible mistake of wearing just a t-shirt on his first day in freezing cold Canada. And it was about his ultimate triumph, learning how to love the snow, skiing, sledding, building snowmen. His story wasn't one of trauma, it was one of adaptation and achievement. Okay, so when you hear a story like that, it kind of changes everything, doesn't it? So let's zoom back out and look at the whole system again, but this time with these powerful insights from the children themselves. It really forces us to ask ourselves a pretty tough question. Is the whole goal of resettlement just about checking boxes? Housing, check. School enrollment, check. Language class, check. Or is it about something much deeper? Is it about actually cultivating a genuine sense of belonging? So the path forward isn't another checklist. It's a fundamental change in mindset. It means we have to start by actually listening to children, centering their voices. It means supporting our teachers so they can be culturally responsive. It means we have to finally close that gap between policy and reality. And ultimately, it's about shifting away from just expecting people to assimilate and moving toward a model of mutual adaptation, where everyone grows and changes together. And maybe that leaves us with one final idea to chew on. What if belonging isn't some gift that we, the host country, hand out to newcomers? What if instead, belonging is a space of shared understanding and respect that we have to actively and humbly create together?